Okay, well, I think we are about ready to get started. Welcome to session two, our afternoon session, track one, for slaying a career in zero waste. And we have some great zero waste youth alumni here today to talk about their experiences. I'd like to start with if we could just go around and do a brief introduction. You can say your name, your position, where you work, and how you got involved with zero waste. And then we can dive into you each talking a little bit more in depth about your experience. Nicole, could you start us off, please?
Hi there. My name is Nikki or Nicole. I go by both. Nicole's more my professional name. And I am the co-founder of Wisdom Supply Company. And we design and manufacture zero waste, plastic-free, vinyl-free, spiral-free school and office supplies. And I got involved with zero waste youth. I'm trying to remember. I would think it was a presentation or a panel discussion at SF Environment that I was part of. I honestly don't remember what the event was for, but that's when I met Freddie and other folks from Zero Waste Youth, and they were like, you should join, and I did, and that was great. And I was a volunteer with Zero Waste Youth, I think for about a year, and then the pandemic happened, and I got busy with work and stuff, but I'm really excited to see familiar names in the participants, and so it's exciting to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. Sorry about that. We'll call you Nikki from now on.
Doesn't matter. Thank you.
All right, Jency, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Great, thank you. So yes, my name is Jency James. I'm a sustainability project manager with Alameda County, and that's located in the San Francisco Bay Area, for those familiar with the space. And in my role, I manage the waste and recycling program at Alameda County, so I'll talk a little bit about that in my presentation. But in terms of how I got involved with Zero Waste Youth, thinking back on it, and I attended either the first or second Convergence when I was a college student, so it's good to just kind of learn more about the space back then. And then several years later, I worked as a day of volunteer, helping with logistics and got involved that way. And I've stayed in touch with a lot of the folks who have been involved in the planning of the Convergence year after year. So it's really exciting to be here as a speaker at the 10th Convergence, and looking forward to the panel discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Jency. Sophia, can you please go ahead?
Hi, I'm Sophia Chan. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently a science policy fellow, or basically an analyst in the California EPA's Department of Toxic Substances Control in their legislative office. So I basically analyze legislation and write bill analyses on hazardous waste management and pollution prevention, like photovoltaic recycling, and those bill analyses go to the governor. And I got involved in zero waste back in high school. There's like this senior benchmark project that you have to do in my high school, and I wanted to do mine on environmentalism. And somebody put me in contact with, I don't remember his name. His name is Nate, but I don't remember his last name. But he put me in contact with a ton of people who are in zero waste, and I started interviewing. Oh, Nate, yeah, Nate Ivy, yeah, Nate Ivy. I started volunteering for Zero Waste Youth, and I remember designing the Convergence, what is it called, like the schedules, and I remember screen printing a bunch of shirts, and so that was back in high school in 2013, and I'm back 10 years later with a PhD. So it's been a journey, and I'm on this year's planning committee as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. It's great to see also so many women here on our panel today. Proud of that. I think it's something that there are more women actually working in environmental programs at this time, but we don't necessarily get always that recognition for the work that we do. So great to have you all here today. Nikki, let's start with you. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about your background and how you ended up co-founding the Wisdom Supply Company?
Sure. So I had a very non-traditional background. I left school. I never graduated college. And I was studying like biology and art and anthropology. I had like all these interests, and I grew up in Massachusetts. I was studying at UMass Amherst, and I left Massachusetts to move to California in hopes to transfer to a UC Berkeley. And I ended up getting really involved in restaurants and working in restaurants. And that's when I sort of started my waste career. As you can imagine, there's a ton of waste from restaurants. And the first restaurant I worked at was Gather, and everything was farm to table, composted, like very waste focused and environmentally focused. And then I went to other bars and restaurants, and I was like, this is a nightmare. And so I went to a talk at the Berkeley Ecology Center, and I learned about plastic pollution. And that changed my entire life. Like my mind was blown. I had no idea how bad the problem was. And even then, we at that point during those talks and presentations, we didn't yet know that plastic is in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the soil where we grow our food. It's in babies' bloods. It's in our bloodstream before we're even born. That wasn't even discussed. It was just, the narrative was all around cleanup and recycling, and how the recycling is broken. And it was right before the national sword, where China had basically said, we're going to stop taking the world's plastic trash because this is insane, it's too much. And so every day since that talk at the Ecology Center, I have been obsessed with waste and plastic pollution. And I became an aggressive volunteer with SF Surfrider and got involved, also the Berkeley Ecology Center, to pass the legislation in Berkeley, Disposable Free Berkeley Ordinance, that passed, I believe, in 2018. My sense of time is a little blurry.
That was actually 2019. I was there.
Oh, you were there? That's awesome. Yeah, that was a fantastic group of a number of different people from various organizations in the Bay Area, all got together, and we met every like Thursday night at 7 p.m. at the Berkeley Ecology Center and talked about what we wanted to happen, how we were going to do it. And Rethink Disposable was like a massive part of that campaign, from, I believe, Upstream. So through various events and just being out there in the trenches and meeting people and networking and constantly focusing on this issue, I had met my business partner, I want to say in 2015 at an event. I think it was hosted at Patagonia, and we kept running into each other. And she is the main founder of the company. She was like, I'm looking for a co-founder. You seem really into this. And I was like, yeah, let's start a business. I had no background in business. It was all activism, and my business partner as well. So we started this company really coming from an activism mindset. It was very grassroots, and we had no idea how to start a business. And we've changed so much over these past 7 years. we began, I hope I'm not like totally taking up too much time, but we started out going from school, like going door to door at schools and giving presentations. And the whole point of our business was to change how back to school shopping is dealt with, because back to school shopping is it is the second largest shopping event after the holidays. And every year students go to, they go to school, they buy all of their school supplies, they're handed a list. And that's where it starts. It's this list of all of these supplies totaling up to like over $100 worth of plastic and vinyl and landfill and disposable supplies. And we would host these locker cleanouts at the end of the year for schools. And we would see firsthand what was getting thrown away. And it's not the students' fault necessarily. They're just growing up in this system. They're trained from day one to go to Office Max and Staples. I don't mean to call those companies out, just did, but and buy all of this stuff and start fresh the next year. And it is an unbelievable amount of paper waste and plastic and disposables. And it's the equivalent of cutting down trees to then send them in landfill, because anything that is spiral bound or has a synthetic cover can't be recycled. So it's just an epic waste of paper. So that's kind of where we began. And then when the pandemic happened, we had to shift from like being a distributor to schools to focusing more on direct to person. I don't like to say direct to consumer because I have a problem with the word consumer, but that kind of shifted our entire business model. And we're still trying to figure out like, is that our main approach, or are we going to work to get back to the school system? And I could go on forever about how many challenges there are with starting a business, but that's my background and that's what we do.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation. It's really nice to hear that you're coming from a background of activism, and that's really like more important to you than the bottom line.
It makes it really hard sometimes, but
sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's switch gears here a little bit. And Jency, I would love to hear more about your work at the county agency. And what do you think are some of the most important changes facing your county efforts right now towards zero waste?
Thank you, Sarah. So actually, I was wondering, would it work if I share my slides? Because I kind of get into that at the presentation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's right. Go ahead, please share your slides.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and just get this teed up here. Okay. Is that coming through okay? Perfect. All right. So yes, like I said at the beginning, I work as a sustainability project manager with Alameda County. And I would say for a long time, our focus was really around implementing recycling and composting programs in our county facilities. And as you can see from the title here, we're shifting away from the downstream solutions of recycling and composting and trying to move more into that upstream of waste prevention, reduction, reuse. So I'll just kind of walk you through these slides here, and I think that'll answer the question that Sarah posed. The first thing I wanted to start with is just to clarify that within my role at Alameda County, I work in the Office of Sustainability, which is in the General Services Agency. And the work of the General Services Agency is to take care of, kind of do like the behind the scenes work for Alameda County. So our focus is really on internal operations. And so for me, that means that I'm focused on doing outreach to county employees and working with our different county agencies to put in recycling and composting programs in our facilities, and then looking at how can we reduce waste within our own county operations. Just to give you a sense of kind of the different facilities that we have over 120 facilities, and the most common are office spaces or administrative spaces. So these are some examples here. We also oversee the services at different community spaces, and this would include places like community centers, libraries, youth centers, and veteran memorials. And there's just a ton of other facilities that we oversee. So this would include anything from maintenance shops to courthouses, different household hazardous waste facilities, and even parking structures. And so the goal or the role that I have is making sure that these spaces have recycling and composting, but I'm starting to move a little bit beyond that. So our Office of Sustainability has been around since, I believe, 2000 or 2001. And for a long time, you'd walk into a county building and you'd see a setup similar to what's on the left side here. So you can see that we have a trash can, a pretty large one, and a small recycling container next to it. In some cases, sometimes the recycling bin would be all the way on the other side of the room, just hanging out by itself. But what's a little bit confusing is that there's no signage here, there's no composting. It's hard for someone to understand what materials would go into these containers. And so over the years, I've been at the county for 3 years now, but my colleagues who came before me worked on putting these programs in place so that when you walked into a county building to dispose of your waste, you would see a setup that looks something more like this. So instead, you can see here we have a 4-stream system of landfill, paper recycling, mixed recycling, and compost. Everything is the same size. There's a universal setup here, and we have a color-coordinated bins and signs. So that way, the user could very easily walk up to this waste station and understand how to dispose of their materials correctly. So we've achieved a lot of progress on that front. The vast majority of our county facilities have recycling and composting, and things are going pretty smoothly there. But now we wanted to step back and say, we've accomplished that lower hanging fruit of getting these programs into buildings, but how can we prevent waste from being generated in the first place? What are some things we can do to reduce the amount of material we have to recycle and compost to begin with? And so that takes me to something that we've been working on for the past couple of years now. Our office has been spearheading the next climate action plan for our government services and operations. And we're actually at a point of getting it finalized and approved by the Board of Supervisors next month. So if you're interested, I put some links to that in the Jamboard slides. So if anyone wants to follow that process, you can sign up to get some updates. But as you can see, we have 6 different sections of the plan, and each one is focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions within our county operations in different ways. Transportation section, there's community resilience, and then we have a section called sustainable materials management. So I would say in our last climate action plan, the role of this section was pretty much kind of like waste and recycling, was getting those programs, buildings, maybe doing some work around paper reduction. But now we're really moving past that and looking at like reuse, repair, and sustainable procurement. Right, so I wanted to talk through what some of these projects actually look like. And so one example is swapping out single-use or disposable products in favor of reusables with food service, because we have some county facilities that produce a lot of food on a regular basis. And so we'd want to make sure that any like servingware or foodware that's being used would actually be reused instead of being tossed out after a couple minutes. The second initiative that we're looking at is implementing what we call a reuse hierarchy, and it's policy focused. But the idea here is that when an employee needs to use a new item, maybe they need an office chair because their previous one isn't needed perhaps, they would, instead of buying something brand new, they would first look to see if they could get a reused option through a reuse program we have at the county, or they would look into either leasing or renting equipment. And the idea here is that instead of just running to the store and buying something brand new, employees would look at other options that would reduce waste. And then the last initiative I wanted to highlight here is setting minimum environmental performance or purchasing standards. Some of the big purchase categories we have at the county are things like furniture, computer or IT equipment, as well as things like office supplies. And so because we use so much of that material in our daily use as a county, we want to make sure that we're buying products that are made sustainably or have certain certifications that prove that they're being disposed of correctly and not contributing to environmental harms or health harms. All right, and then I wanted to feature this photo here. So we have a reuse warehouse in San Leandro, and anytime there's like, I guess, excess furniture or office equipment of some kind that's no longer needed by an employee or a department, it gets sent to this warehouse where it's stored until somebody else with the county needs it. And one thing that's kind of unique is that the warehouse staff, they will actually do repair of some items. So for instance, this is a picture of the repair space. And they will actually make repairs to items like office chairs that maybe the wheel came off. So they make sure that they can actually repair that item and put it back into the inventory instead of having to toss that item out. Right, so this is an example of one of the kind of the way we framed the initiatives within the climate action plan. So this first bullet here, this is showing kind of that overarching measure or initiative. So we have here, we would foster a culture of reuse and repair in the county by developing resources to keep county assets in circulation. That's kind of just the broad idea of what we want to do. But then we have the submeasure here, which is the specific project that we would implement in order to achieve that overarching measure. So for this one, the submeasure here is we would create a website for departments and county employees to easily find and share used county furniture and equipment. And the idea behind making it an online service is that employees would no longer have to physically travel to the warehouse in San Leandro. They would be able to view the inventory online and reuse items very easily. All right, so I kind of just flew through that for the slides here, but I just wanted to put my contact information. So if anyone wants to learn more about work happening in Alameda County or want to learn more about the sustainable materials management section of our climate action plan, you can reach out to me and would be happy to also do informational interviews, just share about my experience as well. So I'll go ahead and just stop sharing, but still happy to answer any questions that are asked.
Awesome. Thank you, Jency. Really exciting to see the work that you're doing, kind of taking that to the next level for the county, going beyond just having the waste streams and good signage and moving up to reuse and repair.
Thank you.
And if anyone has any questions, you want to put them in the chat, we could, do Q&A at the end or as, the speakers are going. But we will have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Sophia, if you could please tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and how you got to be a policy fellow and the work that you're doing as a policy fellow.
Sure. So I really am excited about being part of a career panel because I really wish that somebody had told me about science policy back when I was in high school. I only found out about science policy like halfway through my PhD, which is like way too late, but I mean, it's not too late, but it was like took way longer for me to find out about it. So my lifelong goal has always been to fight climate change and significantly reduce carbon emissions. And so for a very long time, I wanted to accomplish that goal by researching new technologies to solve the world's problems. So I studied chemical engineering at UC Berkeley. I interned at Tesla and I worked on battery technology and supply chain. And then I went to go get a PhD at Columbia University studying carbon capture membrane materials. And then my science policy origin story started in August 2020 when I was knee deep in research. And I remember that week I was really focused on trying to find a very specific Kuhn length of a very specific polymer at a specific annealing temperature. And my parents texted me saying that they're packing and they're booking a hotel. And it turns out that they had gotten a yellow alert for the California wildfires. So they had sent me apocalyptic photos of the mountain behind our house just on fire. And I looked at what I was doing with my life. I was like, what am I doing that is actually helping climate change right now? And the research that I was doing was going to take maybe 15 to 20 years, if it even reaches commercialization. And I realized that climate change is happening now. And I wanted to make a really big much bigger and more immediate impact. So I had this really pivotal moment when I really realized what I wanted to do was climate and environmental policy. And so this was really scary to pivot from having like over 10 years of engineering research experience to go into politics and policy, because Asian women don't really go into policy and politics. They go into medicine and engineering. And I realized I had been involved with political campaigns. I've always wanted to be more informed about political issues and talk to people how to solve societal problems. So I started taking policy and law classes, and that led me to attend the Summer Policy Colloquium held by the American Meteorological Society. And at the colloquium, I met policy folks from the federal level all the way down to the local level, the Arctic, lobbyists. And so that like really launched me into like the possibilities of science policy. And then when you're close to graduating, everyone will always ask what you want to do after. And I told everyone I was interested in science policy, and an old lab mate put me in contact with the program manager of my fellowship, California Council on Science and Technology. And they really convinced me that CCST was a super fun, exciting place to get started in science policy, especially in California, because I don't know if anyone knows this, but California is like the #1, like they're leading in motor vehicle standards. They like set the standards for the rest of the nation in terms of motor vehicle standards, energy efficiency, and all this stuff. So they're like really leading in terms of like climate and environmental policy. It took a lot of help from friends and random ex-fellows that I contacted on LinkedIn to edit my essays and prep me for interviews. And now I'm a CCST Science Policy Fellow, currently working on legislation review for Cal EPA's Department of Toxic Substances Control. I get to write bill analyses on things like solar panel recycling and hazardous waste management like PFAS. This is really common in the conversation right now. And those bill analyses get to go to the governor's office. And that influences the governor's plans and what he signs into law. And this is basically my elevator pitch. I don't know if I want to take up too much time. We want to spend it on asking questions or answering questions.
That's perfect. Thank you, Sophia. Really great to hear about your kind of trajectory there. Sounds like you're working on some exciting stuff. We are going to go ahead and move into kind of like a rapid fire roundtable questions now. So I'll ask a question and then ask each of you to kind of give a shorter answer to it. And then we can also, if anyone has any questions they want to pop into the chat, we can answer those at the end. All right, so first question. You are all former Zero Waste Youth USA planning members. Tell us, what was your role with Zero Waste Youth and what did you achieve?
Should I start?
Yes, yeah, we can go ahead and just do the order of Nikki, Jency, and then Sophia.
Okay, great. Wow, my role with Zero Waste Youth was I was part of the Convergence Planning Committee and building the content and finding speakers for 2019 Convergence, I think, 2019 or 2020. And the question is what impact that had on
yeah, what was your role? What did you achieve in your time working on Zero Waste?
I achieved meeting a lot of really great people and expanding my knowledge of zero waste and understanding of the whole ecosystem of all the different types of jobs and people that is possible in the world of zero waste. And it's not just my understanding of, it's not just one thing, it's an entire realm of people who make zero waste possible. So it really expanded my horizons.
Yeah, so for me, I was actually never an official member of the committee. I usually helped out the day of, and I would say for me, getting involved with Zero Waste Youth, it really kind of opened the door to the zero waste world locally here in the Bay Area, getting to meet people who are working on zero waste in different capacities. It really helped like open my mind to just the amazing work that's happening in this field. And I found that a lot of people working in zero waste are involved in different organizations and wear different hats, but they're still involved in furthering the mission. So it was a great like networking experience, getting to make new friends, and something that I highly recommend. Even if you want to sign up as a volunteer, just to dip your toes into the water and do a little bit of learning, that's a great way to get involved.
So like I mentioned, I was involved in Zero Waste Youth back when I was in high school. I was like a graphic designer, and I designed the schedule and the little pamphlet things that have like the sponsors and schedule things in it. And I also helped screen print some t-shirts. And even though I unfortunately wasn't able to get more involved because I was so busy with school and work, but I think developing that zero waste mindset and like discovering that there was a whole world of people who had like solutions for if you wanted to design your own shampoo or detergent. And even though I was in high school, I didn't have the financial means to have a zero waste life. But when I started making my own money, I was like, wow, I can buy my own wooden toothbrush. Not when I go to the grocery store to buy my own groceries, I don't need to get a plastic bag. I can just put the groceries in my cart. So having that mindset and developing that mindset as a young person, and then once I was able to financially make my own decisions, I decided to just make like decisions and voting with my money that is like, a way to be zero waste in my own life. That was a terrible sentence, but you get what I mean.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Sophia. I really appreciate that. I do think sometimes people get caught up in that, certain things about living a zero waste lifestyle. It does take money and time to get there. And I think it's really important to just focus on like that zero waste is the goal. And it's not necessarily like, that we're all going to achieve 100% zero waste all the time, but that we're really just striving to make the changes that we can to get there. All right. Next question for you all. How has your industry that you work in changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
I love this question because I've noticed it's changed a lot. 5 years ago, when my business partner and I would talk to people about waste and plastic, a lot of the responses we would get were, that's a really great project. How nice for you to work on that. Good for you. And then that was kind of the end of the conversation. Or does it cost more? And since, over these past 5 years, there has been so much more media attention on these issues that I think it has begun to change the minds of people, that there's more of an awareness, and you're coming into a conversation with people and you're not teaching them and trying to convince them that plastic is an issue, and you don't sound like a conspiracy theorist. I love when people used to say, oh yeah, I heard about that plastic island floating out in the ocean. Like it was just this issue that's like, yeah, that's a problem that's in the ocean now, like big deal. Now, you say the words plastic pollution, or PFAS, and people are like, oh yeah, they understand it more. And that makes life so much easier. And it's exciting to me that there's more awareness now. It used to feel really defeating, having to explain this stuff over and over and over again, and to have people kind of brush you off like you're crazy. And I unfortunately believe that things are going to get a lot worse. The news is not going to get any better. And but the positive side to that is that I think that there are way more solutions. There are more people involved. There are fantastic organizations like Zero Waste Youth, and young people are going to start taking over because previous generations, no shade, no disrespect, but they have failed us in a lot of ways. And I think that we're going to see a lot more young people stepping up to the plate with really fantastic solutions to change our economy and to change policy and to change how governments work. And I look forward to that.
Yes, I would say for me, the biggest change I've seen is that it's gone from focusing so much on individual action and really more into systems change. Because before I joined the county, I worked as a recycling coordinator in Contra Costa County. And the messaging at that time was really just telling everyone, you know, if you think it's recyclable, like go ahead and put it in the blue bin, and kind of encouraging wish cycling, which is very much like stop sending stuff to the landfill. But now we're really moving away from that. And first of all, like telling people to be more thoughtful about what items they're putting into the recycling compost bins. But I think because of all the challenges that from China's national sword policy, I've started seeing a lot more like, you know, straw bans, you know, things that are around like the circular economy and reducing waste. And I talked a little bit about that, you know, in my own presentation, but I think that's the biggest thing. It's like not just focusing so much on educating individual people and communities, but looking at, you know, what systems need to be changed in order to keep this waste from being produced, first of all. So, and then I think it will only grow in the future. I know we've heard a little bit about laws throughout Convergence, like banning PFAS from clothing and things like that. And that's huge because that takes it away from the consumer to figure out like, oh, what clothing can I not wear? Or, you know, what things do I need to install in my washing machine to avoid this, right? It's kind of looking at what's happening higher up the chain. And I know that there are more laws like that currently being passed and currently being reviewed. So it's daunting in a lot of ways. There's a lot of bad news out there, but I'm hopeful that being more aware of these issues will lead to that systems change further up the line.
So I will speak about the Department of Toxic Substances Control at California EPA. Historically, they have been in the pocket, basically been in the pockets of industry. And the current director of the department is not shy about admitting the really poor history. She joined, I think, in 2020 or 2021. And so far, ever since she took the helm of the department, they have been aggressively engaging more strongly with community. So for example, I was a session host for somebody who talked about Exide, the Exide battery recycling facility in LA. And that is like, just like incredible amounts of environmental injustice. And the Department of Toxic Substance Control, DTSC, was put in charge of cleaning up Exide and pursuing legal action to get responsible parties to pay for the cleanup and pay for the residential cleanups and all that stuff. So definitely significantly more community engagement and having more workshops, having more like communication with communities. And it's definitely very difficult because there is a history of mistrust with government. There's nobody who's ever been like, thank God government's coming. So there's definitely needs to be fixing that relationship and building strong relationships going forward to fix historical wrongs.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sophia, for bringing in that equity piece is so important to the work that we do. All right, next question for you all. What is one piece of practical advice you give to someone starting out, maybe still a student or just entering the workforce?
Sorry, I didn't really hear the question. What is one piece of advice for a student or someone starting out?
Yes, well, yeah. What is one piece of practical advice that you would give to somebody who's just getting started out in their career?
I think my advice would be to do a lot of different things, get involved with a lot of different organizations, and within reason, don't overextend yourself. But like all of the panelists here have mentioned, the world of zero waste is a whole spectrum, and there's so many different positions and jobs that you can do and paths that you can take. And the only real way to know if something is for you is to give it a try. So expose yourself to a lot, read a lot of different things, and get involved with different organizations and volunteer and intern if you can, and go from there. And don't get discouraged, and don't ever feel climate depressed, because you could get there. And the best way to fight that is to engage with community and to engage with people working on solutions, and channel that into working on something.
I'll build on Nikki's answer, and say I'd also recommend talking to people who work in this field, either like informal informational interviews, or just networking at events like that, because folks who are in this field love to share what got them here, and to provide advice, and to share their experiences. So even though it might be a little bit intimidating reaching out to someone, just know that they'll want to share, and be happy to support you and just expand your horizons.
Okay, basically you two stole my answers. I was gonna say what I really regret not doing in high school was just doing as much as I really regret not going into robotics. I regret not doing coding. I regret science Olympiad, getting really into the science and exploring all these different options. And then also talking to people when I was pivoting from scientific research into policy, I had no contacts in policy, and nobody I knew was in policy or politics. And it basically was just literally Googling CCST in LinkedIn, and then just message, literally bothering people. And the reason why they responded is because they did the same exact thing. People who got into science policy, or whatever industry that you're trying to break into, have had informational interviews, and the kind of questions you want to ask are what was your story? People love talking about themselves, and what was your story? What is your day-to-day? Can you please read my application materials? The worst that can happen is that they say no. And I think just opening yourselves up to building genuine relationships and networking and exploring different things. I basically restated what you two said.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom. I do think we are possibly actually a little bit over time here, so I think we got to wrap it up. We did also get one last great question in the chat there. If any of you want to just respond to that, maybe in the chat. Are there things you do to prevent burnout and sustain yourselves in this work, which is such a critical part of it can be really draining sometimes. But I do think that we need to close out the session at this time and turn it back over to Bonnie. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time.